My name is Maris Vale, 32 years old. I've spent most of my adult life confusing endurance for love, convincing myself that the people who drained me were just thirsty and I was a river. Turns out I was a faucet they refused to fix. Jiggle the handle, shake the pipe, and the water always came. Sunday dinners were supposed to be a truce, a weekly ceasefire in a house that liked to pretend it wasn't a battlefield. I brought a pan of lasagna that had my apartment smelling like basil and brown cheese, a basket of garlic bread wrapped in a towel so the butter wouldn't congeal. My mother said, "Oh," the way people do when a waiter sets down a dish they didn't mean to order. My father gestured toward the takeout Derek had arrived with. Wings, fries, lukewarm, the oil already translucenting through the cardboard, and announced, "Real food, finally." Everyone laughed. I told myself it was nothing, to keep the peace, to swallow the salt and call it seasoning. It wasn't nothing. It was the appetizer. They were talking about the family reunion, flights, cottages by a lake, a group chat bubbling with plans. I wasn't in the group chat. I wasn't in the plans. I told myself it was an oversight, a glitch, a missed tap on a screen. I cleared my throat and said carefully, like handing a glass across a tile floor, "Let me know the date for the reunion. I'll book early this time." Derek didn't look up from his phone. He smirked with just one side of his mouth, a trick he learned from boys who never learned anything else, and said, "You're not family. Don't show up." It landed heavy and then it detonated. The table erupted. My father slapped his knee like a TV audience plant. My mother tried to hide her smile and missed. Cousins laughed too hard, the way people laugh when they're auditioning for approval. I waited for someone, anyone, to say that was too far. No one did. Clarity is not always gentle. It can arrive like a metal exhale. I stood up, slid my chair in with a small politeness that made the laughter suddenly too loud, and gathered my things. No scene, no raised voice, not even a cracked joke to paper over the crack. Just leaving. As I crossed the living room, I saw the family portrait my parents refused to take down from 20 years ago. My face was in it, smaller, eager. I pressed my fingertips to the glass without knowing why, like I might feel heat through it one last time, and then I walked out. The anger that followed wasn't volatile. It didn't spit or flare. It settled low and red, a banked coal. I couldn't sleep for 3 nights. My grandmother's old warning looped like a lullaby with the melody removed. You can't make cold people warm by giving them more of your fire. I'd kept trying. Covered rent for my parents when my father lost ours, sent $15,000 to seed Derek's launch, floated utilities, filled fridges, Venmoed emergencies that always seemed to occur on weekends with good weather. I thought love was measured in invoices paid and crises handled. I thought family was a noun you kept feeding until it turned into a verb. No one texted in the 4 days after dinner. Not to ask if I got home safe, not to say too far, not even to request a lasagna recipe they hadn't eaten. Silence turned out to be information. Then Derek texted like we were on a different timeline. "Hey, weird question. Did your bank block the transfer? Loan payment didn't go through." I read it twice. My hands didn't shake. I typed 4 words, each a brick. Not family, not funded. Then I blocked him. The knock came before sunrise the next morning, starting as a firm rap and graduating to fists, then to the kind of pounding that believes it owns what it hits. I didn't open the door. The peephole gave me an eye full of denim jacket, baseball cap, impatience. I made tea, counted the beats. The walls hummed like they were being asked a question they didn't want to answer. When it finally stopped, I watched from the kitchen window as a silver SUV reversed too fast and swerved down my block. My father's car, the taillight still cracked from last year's parking lot confession he never made. The calls began in an hour. My mother's number, my father's number, 2 unknowns in a row, and then a long text from Carly, the girlfriend I'd met twice. She wrote from the polite script. He was under incredible pressure. I should be reasonable. We were family. Reasonable is what people request when you stop being useful. I ignored it. I packed an overnight bag and drove to my grandmother's. She calls her house a retreat from the circus, and it is. A small square of quiet just outside town where wind is allowed to be wind and not a problem. She opened the door before I knocked. "Took you long enough," she said, which was her version of "I knew this day would come." Soup was on before I could sit down. Chicken and rice and lemon, the kind that loosens something behind your ribs. I ate 2 bowls without making excuses for hunger. When I told her about dinner, the sentence, the laughter, she didn't look surprised. She refolded the towel she'd used to hold the hot pot and said, "They've always taken you for granted. This is what people do when the well runs dry." I rested my head on my forearm and listened like the tile was a radio. "The first time you say no to people who live off your yes," she added, "they act like you changed, but really you just started seeing." I slept on her couch like a child with a fever that finally broke. No calls, no guilt, just the kind of silence that feeds you. The envelope was waiting on my doormat when I returned home the next morning. Plain white, rubber banded, heavy with 20s, $400, no note. A peace offering, a guilt payment, an insult. I left it there until the sun warmed it, then dropped it in the trash. I am not a jar to be tipped with cash. I am not a bouncer you tip to get past a line you made. Late afternoon, my father called again. And this time I answered, not because I owed him anything, but because I wanted to hear what story he would choose. He started in the middle, as if beginnings are for people who make admissions. "Derek's business is in a tight spot," he said, like a weather report he had no control over. "The missed payment messed up a supplier deal, late fees, a freeze, serious consequences." He said it all in a tone that suggested consequences are things that happen to good people for bad reasons. "Why?" I asked when he stopped. Just that word, a small pry bar. "It's not like we used you," he said fast. "You're taking this too personally." There it was. The old religion. Your sacrifices don't count. Your pain is unprofessional. Your boundaries are a mood. I hung up. Not dramatic. Just done. That night, I pulled up my bank app and started creating a ledger for a life that had been undocumented on purpose. Every transfer labeled, "just this once." Every utility I paid when their lights were about to find darkness again. Each emergency that looked suspiciously like a plan. Just over $20,000 in 2 years. I printed statements, highlighted every line that was not for me, filled a manila envelope with proof of being asked and asked and asked. On a sticky note atop the pages, I wrote, "This is who I've been. Ask yourselves who you've been." I mailed it to the house I grew up in, then made tea and sat with the sound of the kettle simmering, like the sea, like a crowd, like the inside of my own chest. 4 more days passed, and, like magic, everyone remembered me. Derek sent flowers that looked like they'd been rescued from a gas station counter at closing time. My mother left a voicemail with the word family used 12 times in 60 seconds, her voice skipping from bright to beseeching like she couldn't find the right station. My father attached a scanned photo of me at 9, popsicle in hand, dirt on my knees, a note in his careful print. "We're still a family, Maris." Now they cared, now I mattered, but it felt like stage lights switched on for a scene that didn't require me anymore. I had already stepped off the set. That night, I stood at my window and watched the streetlights blink on one by one like a code I almost recognized. I thought about signatures, how easy it is for some people to scribble your name onto their needs and call it love. I thought about meetings where attendance is stamped required, as if presence can be demanded like payment. I thought about hospital rooms and their metronome beeps, and how some alarms don't belong to me anymore. Somewhere, a future I hadn't agreed to yet was changing its clothes. Somewhere, a line from my grandmother's warning found a new ending. You cannot warm a house that keeps its windows open to the cold and then blames you for the draft. I turned out the light and let the apartment be dark on purpose. I slept. Not because it was over, but because I had finally flipped the first switch. The next morning I expected a lull, a pause where everyone recalibrated and decided how to proceed around the boulder I had rolled into the middle of the road. Instead, my phone lit up like a slot machine. Mother, father, 2 aunts who only called when someone died or needed chairs carried, and Derek from numbers he thought I wouldn't recognize. I stood at the sink with coffee that tasted like resolve and let it all ring until the room sounded like a hive. When it finally quieted, my father called again. I answered this time, not out of softness, but curiosity. I wanted to hear the script he'd chosen. He skipped greeting and history and landed where he thought leverage lived. "The supplier fees are compounding," he said. "Banks are hard-nosed. We're swamped." The "we" landed like sleet. Why? I asked, not a question so much as a chisel. He exhaled. Because we're a family, and sometimes families need to pull together. You know how much we've done for you. We've always. I hung up. The click wasn't angry, it was surgical. I put the mug down and felt the old tremor in my hands, the one that used to send me to my banking app like a faithful dog, bringing a leash. The tremor passed. What remained was a steadiness I'd mistaken for cruelty when other people practiced it. It wasn't cruelty, it was the refusal to subsidize harm. I opened my laptop and began the audit I'd been avoiding for exactly as long as it had been needed. 2 years of transactions, spilled across the screen in lines of digits and faint descriptions, a breadcrumb trail of emergencies that didn't belong to me. Rent just this once. A power bill rescued on a Wednesday at 4:58 p.m. Groceries that looked suspiciously like party supplies. A late car payment with a note that said, "Promise this is the last." An Uber to a club I'd never seen. 3 small Venmos to Carly Hearts, marked with quiet emojis. I highlighted until the page glowed. The number settled like weather, just over 20,000. It was not ruinous, but it was not nothing. It was a life leaned on until it bent. I printed everything, stack after stack feeding out like breath, and slid the papers into a manila envelope, the kind people use to ship contracts and keepers. On a square of yellow, I wrote in small, even letters, "This is who I've been. Ask yourselves who you've been." I addressed the envelope to the house where my height is still pencil marked in a pantry, where the door shrieks when you're trying to be quiet, where love was too often a word that stood in for debt. Then I walked it to the corner, dropped it in the blue mouth of the mailbox, and felt a sensation I hadn't expected. Grief so clean it almost sparkled. I was mourning the person who had always jumped in, the one who wore her cape until it smelled like smoke. The pivot came fast. It always does when the usual methods fail. First a bouquet on my doormat that looked like it had been rescued from a gas station at midnight, plastic sleeve fogged with its own breath. Then a voicemail from my mother with a voice so bright it was almost creaky. "Come for lunch, sweetheart. Let's reset." Another the next day, gentler but rehearsed. "He's under pressure, your brother. Try to see his side. Family, family, family." The third arrived near midnight, a small sobbing that slid into the words like a tremor. "Do you still love me?" That one cut something I had bandaged poorly. I didn't call back, not because I didn't love her, but because love that keeps enabling isn't love. It's anesthesia. Derek sent an email with the subject repayment plan, an Excel sheet that had all the carelessness of a napkin promise. The dates were vague, the sums were hope, the signature line was blank. At the bottom, a sentence that wanted to sound like wisdom. "Let's move past this. We're family, right?" The same word he'd weaponized at dinner, now sat there like a key he thought would still open my door. I didn't reply. My silence surprised even me. I had thought I would be tempted to negotiate, to bargain for a softer version of the same harm. It turns out when you've eaten enough cheap apologies, your palate sharpens. That Saturday, my mother texted, "Come over for dinner, just you, no drama." I pictured the table reset like a stage, an empty chair, waiting to applaud anyone who sat in it. I stayed home and roasted carrots with cumin and ate them out of the pan, barefoot, the kind of small rebellion that feels like a ceremony. By 8 p.m., Derek was texting through his third number, "You're being ridiculous." Then, "We were joking. You're taking everything too seriously." And finally, the naked truth, mean as a cornered dog. "You think you're better than us now." I took screenshots and filed them with the rest. Paper has a way of steadying reality. The next day, I tested something shameless in myself. My cousin posted photos of a backyard dinner, folding tables, the cheap string lights we've used for a decade, the banner from someone's graduation repurposed with Scotch tape to say family night. In 2 separate frames, my old chair was visible, empty by design, a vacancy staged like a warning or a dare. My mother commented, "Missing our girl tonight, come home soon." I typed, "Looks great, sent." What I felt wasn't pettiness. It was diagnosis. They didn't want me. They wanted the optic of me, the convenience of me. My comment wasn't a wave. It was a mirror. I left town for the mountains a few days later, an impulsive rental I justified as therapy. The cabin had a deck that faced a row of black pines and a sky that didn't apologize for taking up space. No service, no sound but insects and my own blood. I hiked until my thoughts lost their sharp edges, wrote until the pages softened, slept through a night without alarms, literal or inherited. On the second morning, I woke to the first instinct not to check my phone. I stood at the window with coffee and realized I was watching myself return to myself like a figure walking up the driveway after a long absence. When I got back, there was a voicemail from a number that didn't announce who it belonged to. I let it go, the way I now let a dozen things go. Later, washing dishes, I pressed play with a damp finger. A polite voice introduced a law office and proceeded to lay out the kind of dread that arrives dressed as procedure. A $10,000 business loan in Derek's name, defaulted. A secondary guarantor listed as me. A digital signature delivered through a service whose commercials I'd seen during football games. My heart did that old drum while my head went very still. "We'll send the documents," the voice said. "We don't foresee this holding up, given the circumstances, but we need you to confirm this is not your signature." It wasn't my signature. It was an imitation, half-hearted but confident, a squiggle that had never belonged to me now asserting it did. I felt the room tilt, then right itself. I thanked the woman, asked for everything in writing, and hung up into a quiet that made the refrigerator motor sound like applause. Then I moved. I called the bank, flagged accounts I had forgotten were still open from that season of generosity I'd rebranded as love. I changed passwords until my brain felt like a locked cabinet. I pulled my credit report and threw the bolt across my identity like a bar in an old movie. I called the law office back and spoke slower than I felt. "Please document that I was unaware," I said, "and that I do not authorize anyone to sign for me, ever, for anything." When the PDF of the loan arrived, I stared at the date like it might morph. It was signed on a Tuesday afternoon 2 months before the dinner, after I had paid his last urgent invoice, before he told me I wasn't family. That combination undid a knot I had spent a decade pulling tight. If I had kept funding, if I hadn't blocked him, I might never have seen this. He would have let me take a fall I didn't know I was approaching, all while kissing my cheek over pot roast and calling me generous. The relief I felt was sharp-edged and strange, not because I'd been spared a debt I didn't owe, but because the truth had finally walked in without knocking. That evening, there was another envelope at my door, the kind of thick cream paper you use for weddings and apologies. Inside, a card with my mother's handwriting that still loops letters like they're shy. "We all make mistakes," she wrote. "Please don't punish us for loving you poorly." Tucked behind it, a photo. I am 5, knees dirty, a red popsicle melting down my arm. Derek is beside me, grinning with the kind of teeth you only have before consequence. On the back, my mother had written, "This is who you were before money. Please don't forget." She still didn't get it. It wasn't money. It was the years of being chosen second, of being harvested for steadiness and then mocked for being steady. It was the laughter at the table. It was the way my name had become a signature other people felt entitled to write. I put the card on the counter and looked at it until the light shifted off it. Then I took it with me to a lawyer's office whose carpet was too new and whose magazines were about lives without this plot. I didn't ask to sue. I didn't posture charges. I asked for a letter with teeth but no blood. A cease and desist addressed to Derek and CC'd to my parents. "You will not use my name, my signature, my credit, my identity. You will not tell any lender, merchant, cousin, or stranger in a suit that I am your guarantor, your safety net, your yes." We mailed copies that afternoon. There was no reply. Silence can be dismissal. Sometimes it is acknowledgement wearing plain clothes. On my way home, my grandmother called. She didn't know about the signature yet, but she had seen my mother at the pharmacy and wanted to report the weather. "Your mother looks tired in a way that isn't about sleep," she said. "Your father is angrier that you didn't fold than about anything that led you there." It shouldn't have hurt. It did. Not the anger. I could live without it. But the picture of my mother's face, unvarnished, pulled at a thread I had vowed to leave alone. I sat in my car outside my building and listened to an old woman breathe. "You did right," she said. "Right is different from easy." I went upstairs and locked the door and stood still long enough to hear my own pulse fade. Somewhere, embossed envelopes were being addressed. Somewhere, agendas were being typed with firm little periods. Somewhere, a lake was being booked and a banner ironed and a chair set aside like a lure. I could feel all of it moving toward me, like weather I had already learned how to walk through. 2 weeks passed before the next knock from the past arrived. Not on my door this time, but in my mailbox. Thick, cream-colored envelope. Hand-addressed. The kind of paper that tries to look important so you'll forget what it's hiding. I stood there, key still in the lock, and felt that quiet hum of dread I've learned to translate. They're not done. Inside was an invitation printed on heavy stock with glossy leaves and gold lettering. Vale Family Reunion. Lake Rowan Resort dates, itinerary, and a line at the bottom, bold enough to cut through everything else. Attendance required for family meeting. Sunday, 9:00 a.m. I almost laughed. Required. My name was printed at the top like I'd won something. A second sheet fluttered out. My father's letter, this one neatly typed. Things have escalated beyond what anyone wanted, it began. That tone again, the passive one, the one that bleeds guilt without owning it. Your brother has been under immense pressure. Mistakes have been made on both sides. This reunion is an opportunity to rebuild the family from the inside out. Derek will propose a repayment solution in person. We believe a conversation would be more productive than legal threats. Legal threats. My pulse kicked once, but not from fear, from clarity. They still thought this was about the money. I set the letter down and stared at the words repayment solution. They wanted me to come shake hands with the same man who forged my signature and cost me months of sleep, to make peace under the guise of togetherness. A weekend retreat to renegotiate my silence. The same evening, the phone rang with a number I didn't know. I almost ignored it, but something in the area code, familiar, made me answer. Maris? It's Carly. Her voice was small, cautious, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to call. She said she'd moved out of Derek's place. Things got bad, she admitted, worse than anyone knows. I didn't speak, I just let her fill the air. He's been drinking more, blaming everyone for the business tanking. Your dad keeps telling him it's your fault, that if you'd just been reasonable, everything would have been fine, but it's not true. Her breath hitched. He's a mess, Maris, and your mom? She looks like she's shrinking. I closed my eyes, picturing my mother's hands, the way she used to dry them on her apron while saying everything was fine. Why are you telling me this? Because you were the only adult in that family, she said. I didn't see it before, but I do now. That sentence broke something open inside me. Not pain, not anger, just a strange kind of validation. Thank you, Carly, I said softly. That means more than you think. After we hung up, I sat for a long time, listening to the hum of the refrigerator again. It had become my metronome for calm. The next morning, my phone rang again. This time, it was my mother. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but my grandmother's voice came back to me. You'll want the choice. So I answered. Hi, Mom. Silence at first, then a tremor. Maris. She stopped, collected herself. I miss you. The words came out uneven, like she wasn't used to saying them without a reason attached. I didn't rush her. I know we've done things wrong, she said finally. I know you think we don't see it, but we do. I don't know how to fix what we broke. For the first time in years, her tone wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't manipulative. It was exhausted, real. I'm sorry, she whispered. For all of it. For choosing sides. For letting them laugh. For not stopping him that night. I don't even know if I deserve to say this, but I love you, and I miss my daughter. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't enough. But it was honest. And that honesty, fragile as it was, reached something I thought was gone. I took a breath. I forgive you, Mom. I meant it. But forgiveness isn't the same as access. When she asked if I'd come to the reunion, I said no. She started to cry softly again. Why not? We could start fresh. Because peace isn't something I can build in a room that still smells like smoke, I said gently. I don't want revenge. I just want distance. She went quiet and then quietly. I understand. I think she did. After the call, I wrote her a letter, not the kind with accusations, but one meant to close a chapter properly. It listed everything I'd paid for in the past 2 years, every bill, every loan, every emergency. At the bottom, I wrote, Consider the debt forgiven. but don't mistake that for an invitation." Then I sealed it and dropped it in the mailbox on my lunch break. That was supposed to be the ending. But it never really ends with families like ours. It just changes the scenery. A week later, Grandma called again, early, which she never did unless something was wrong. Her voice was low. "Your father collapsed yesterday. They admitted him to the hospital. Heart problems. It's not looking good." My chest didn't seize the way I thought it might. I didn't cry. "Your mom and Derek are there," she continued. "I thought you should know. Not because you owe him anything, but because I know you, and I know you'd want the choice." She was right. I thanked her and said I'd think about it. I didn't call that day. That evening, my mother's number flashed again. I almost didn't answer. But guilt, that old phantom limb, twitched, so I picked up. Her voice was brittle, paper-thin. "He's scared, Maris. He won't admit it, but I can see it. They're talking surgery. He asked about you." "He used my name?" "No," she said after a pause. "He just asked if you knew." I waited. "Did he apologize?" She was quiet for so long I thought the line had died. Then she sighed. "No." "Then I don't know what else there is to say." "The medical bills are going to be—" "Mom!" I cut her off before she could finish. "Don't." She swallowed. "I know. We don't have the right to ask." I exhaled slowly. "I've already given $20,000 and years of myself. I've given enough." There was silence again, but not the sharp kind this time, the kind that sounds like surrender. "You're right," she said softly. It was the first time in my life she'd ever said those words to me. "I still love you," I said, "but I can't come, not yet." "Thank you," she whispered and hung up. For a brief moment, I thought maybe that was it, the closing note of a long, dissonant song. But some melodies refused to fade. Later that night, my voicemail pinged. Unknown number. I knew who it was before I pressed play. "Maris!" Derek's voice crackled through the speaker, loud and frantic. "You're really doing this? You're letting Dad die out of spite? You're selfish, always have been, acting like you're above the rest of us. He needed help with one medication, one—" I stopped listening. I didn't need to hear the rest. The guilt train had arrived right on schedule, but I'd already sold my ticket. The next morning, I wrote one final note. No envelope this time, just a plain, white card addressed to no one. I made peace with all of it. That doesn't mean I'm coming back. Some doors stay closed because what's on the other side already burned down. I hope one day you understand that. I didn't sign it. I mailed it to the house where I'd once learned to measure my worth in favors. They didn't respond. 2 weeks later, the family reunion happened. I only knew because a cousin, one who had never carried Derek's debt, posted photos online. A cabin by the lake, plastic chairs, paper plates, a banner that read family. Always in letters, curling from humidity. Everyone was there, everyone except me. My mother smiled like someone trying not to blink through tears. Derek grinned, that same smirk that once made him untouchable. My chair was empty, perfectly visible in 2 photos. A caption beneath one of them read, "Missing one piece of the puzzle tonight." They still didn't see it. The piece they were missing wasn't me. It was accountability. I closed my laptop and whispered to the quiet, "Keep it." Because sometimes the only way to fix what's broken is to stop returning to the glass that cut you. It's been 3 months since the reunion by the lake. 3 months of silence that felt neither hostile nor healing, just empty. The kind of quiet that sits across the room, breathing evenly, daring you to speak first. In that silence, I built a new rhythm. Morning coffee without dread. Work emails without emotional landmines. Evenings spent in soft light instead of loud apologies. I started sleeping again. Not because everything was fixed, but because I finally stopped rehearsing old arguments in my head. Then, out of nowhere, the world began to tilt back toward me. It started small. A thin envelope from the hospital addressed to me by mistake. I opened it without thinking, expecting some stray insurance correspondence. Inside was a bill. Not in my name, but under my father's. In the corner, written in my mother's handwriting. "We'll figure it out." No note, no plea. Just that sentence, like a quiet confession that they were finally facing something on their own. For the first time, I didn't feel anger, just relief. I left the envelope unopened on my counter for a few days before dropping it in the shredder. Some things aren't mine to carry, and it felt good to watch the blades turn them into dust. 2 weeks later, I received a postcard. No return address, just a photograph of a lake, the same one from the reunion pictures. On the back, one line, "Hope you find peace, even if it's far away." The handwriting was shaky, but familiar, my mother's. I didn't cry. I just stood by the window for a long while, tracing the outline of the water with my thumb. There was something poetic about it. The same place that had been their stage for pretending was now their olive branch. Still, I didn't write back. Some peace only holds if you don't reach too far for it. But fate, or whatever you call the part of life that insists on irony, wasn't done with me. One evening, while I was making dinner, the phone rang. Unknown number again. I let it go to voicemail. Then curiosity, that old traitor, got the better of me. It was Carly. Hey, her voice was quiet, unsure. I don't know if I should even be calling, but you should know. Derek's not doing well. I felt my stomach tighten. Not doing well in our family was a phrase with many disguises. He lost the apartment, she continued. Some creditor came after him. The business accounts are frozen. He's staying with your mom now. Your dad's home from the hospital, but he's different, slower, angry. I could hear the hesitation in her breath. She wasn't gossiping. She was warning me. He blames you for all of it, she said finally. But I don't think he actually believes it anymore. I think he just doesn't know who else to blame. I'm sorry for everything. Her voice cracked a little before she hung up. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator filling the air again. That familiar hum, my metronome for peace, now carried an echo. Not of guilt, but of perspective. Derek's life was finally collapsing under the same weight he'd tried to stack on my shoulders. And my parents, the ones who'd laughed at his jokes and minimized my pain, were standing in the rubble with him. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. Because I finally understood what my grandmother meant that night when she said, "They'll act like you've changed, but really you're just seeing clearly." Seeing clearly didn't mean watching them suffer. It meant seeing who they were and who I no longer needed to be. That weekend, I drove to see my grandmother. The drive out of the city felt lighter this time, like the road had been waiting for me to unclench. Her little house was the same, peeling white paint, overgrown lilac bushes, wind chimes that sounded like laughter when the breeze caught them. She opened the door before I knocked, as always. "Soup's on," she said with a smile. We didn't talk about the family right away. We talked about the garden, about her knees, about how she'd switched to decaf because life's dramatic enough. Then, as the light shifted gold across the kitchen, she said quietly, "Your mother told me you forgave her." "I did," I said, "but forgiveness doesn't mean I'm going back." Grandma nodded slowly. "Good. Forgiveness is the closing of a door, not the reopening of it." We ate in silence for a while, just the two of us, and the sound of spoons against bowls. Before I left, she pressed an envelope into my hand. "I found this when I was cleaning your mother's old desk," she said. "Didn't open it. Thought you should decide what to do with it." It was addressed to me. Faded ink, my mother's looping handwriting. No stamp. She must have written it weeks ago and never sent it. I opened it in my car. "Maris, I know I can't undo what's been done, but I want you to know that I'm proud of you. Not just for what you've achieved, but for what you've survived. You're the only one of us brave enough to stop the cycle. I hope someday your brother understands that too. Love, Mom." The paper trembled in my hand, not from tears, but from something deeper, something like release. I folded the letter carefully, tucked it into the glove compartment, and sat there with my eyes closed until the sun dipped below the trees. On the drive home, I realized something simple. I didn't need closure from them. I already had it, in the quiet choices I'd made every day since walking away. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, the night air had that crisp edge that announces the change of a season. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and stood still for a moment. No missed calls, no unread voicemails, just peace, fragile but real. I poured myself a glass of wine, raised it toward the window, and whispered, "Here's to boundaries that hold." Outside, the streetlight flickered once, the same one that used to keep me awake with its hum. Tonight, it just glowed. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I'd lost a family. I felt like I'd finally come home. Peace is a strange thing. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or a chorus. It just drifts in one morning and sits down like it's always belonged. I woke up one day, months later, and realized that the quiet in my apartment wasn't empty anymore. It was full of space I had reclaimed from noise that used to own me. Life had moved forward without fanfare. I'd been promoted at work, not because I was chasing approval this time, but because I finally had focus. My manager said, "You seem lighter lately." He was right. Letting go of people who drain you gives your mind back its oxygen. The first snow came early that year. It fell outside my window like someone shaking forgiveness from the sky. I watched it pile softly on the ledge and thought about my father. Grandma called a few weeks earlier to say he was home, quieter, slower, but still himself in that stubborn way that refuses to age gracefully. He asks about you sometimes, she'd said, but never directly. I told her she didn't have to pass along messages. What she didn't know was that I had already written him one. It wasn't long or bitter, just a few lines I'd typed one sleepless night and never sent. You taught me that strength meant silence. I spent years mistaking endurance for love, but silence isn't strength, it's survival. And surviving isn't the same as living. I hope you learn that before time runs out. I kept it folded in my desk, not as a weapon, but as a reminder of who I no longer was. Every so often, someone from the old circle reached out. A cousin who just wanted to catch up. An aunt forwarding a chain email about forgiveness. I responded politely but distantly, the way you'd handle a telemarketer selling nostalgia. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger takes energy, and I decided to spend mine elsewhere. It was Grandma who kept the thread between worlds. She'd call with updates, small and harmless. Your mom planted marigolds this year. Derek shaved his head again, says it's a fresh start. Each detail arrived like weather reports from a town I'd moved away from. I listened, nodded, and changed the subject to her soup recipes. But one evening, her tone shifted. They're different now, she said softly. Your mom prays out loud when she thinks no one's listening. Your brother's been quiet. Maybe guilt's finally teaching what love couldn't. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But believing in other people's change requires reopening a door I had sealed for a reason, and I'd learned that not all transformation needs an audience. Still, her words lingered. That night, I dreamed of the lake from those reunion photos, the water smooth as glass, the empty chair reflected in it like a ghost. In the dream, I walked to the chair, touched it, and it dissolved into ripples that carried my reflection away. I woke up calm. Some losses are not tragedies, they're baptisms. In the months that followed, life kept offering small reminders of growth. At work, a younger colleague named Dana came to my desk one afternoon, tears in her eyes. Her family was draining her the same way mine once had. They always make me feel like I owe them, she said. But I don't, right? I smiled. You owe people empathy, not exhaustion. She nodded slowly, absorbing it like medicine. Watching her walk away, I realized how cycles break, not with grand gestures, but with small truths passed down quietly. Spring arrived with an unassuming grace. My apartment smelled of lemon and clean paper. I'd finally taken down the old family photos, framed faces that used to feel like obligation. The walls looked lighter without them, and so did I. One evening, as I was making dinner, there was a knock at my door. It wasn't loud or desperate, just two soft taps. I froze. Through the peephole, I saw her. My mother, alone. Her hair was shorter, streaked with silver, her shoulders smaller somehow. She looked like someone who'd stopped pretending to be unbreakable. I opened the door but didn't step aside. Hi, Mom. She gave me a tired smile. You look well. I am. I won't stay, she said quickly. I just wanted to see you. No speeches, no guilt. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. This was Grandma's idea. She said it belonged with you. Inside was a ring, sample gold, worn thin, with 3 tiny stones that caught the hallway light. I recognized it immediately. My grandmother's wedding band, the one she'd worn through 60 years of storms. She said, my mother whispered, that it's for the one who finally learned the difference between duty and love. The air left my lungs. You drove all this way to give me this? She nodded. And to tell you something. Her eyes brimmed, but her voice didn't break. Your father's sorry. He'll never say it right, but he's been trying to, in his way. I didn't know what to do with that. The part of me that used to rush to fix things wanted to hug her, invite her in, brew tea. The part that had healed knew that sympathy and self-preservation aren't opposites. Tell him I'm okay, I said. She nodded again, wiped her eyes, and smiled. You always were. I watched her walk down the hall and disappear into the elevator. The sound of the doors closing was soft, almost merciful. Later that night, I sat by the window, turning the ring over in my hand. It wasn't glittery or perfect. It was weathered, sturdy, and real. A survivor's ring. That's when I realized something. My story had never been about vengeance or distance. It had been about learning what peace costs and paying it willingly. The next morning, I wrote one final entry in the journal I'd been keeping since the night of that dinner. Peace doesn't mean forgetting who hurt you. It means remembering without bleeding. It means setting the table for yourself and being content with who shows up. Then I closed the notebook, slipped the ring onto my finger, and stepped out into a new day that didn't need anyone's permission to begin. Because some doors stay closed forever, and some finally open, quietly, inward, just enough for light to get in.